Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and this is the 100th episode of this podcast, and I originally had something very different that I was going to talk about. However, there are some things that have taken place recently that kind of derailed that, and I feel it's very important for me to just say my piece on what we have been seeing here in the U.S. Over this last weekend, there were nationwide protests that were taking place, and these protests are over what many people believe to be occurring here politically within the U.S., and that is that people are taking grabs for power, and we are going to be losing our democracy if we do not have changes. The No Kings rallies that took place, there was one even here locally that I had every intention of attending, but some plans changed, and by the time I was done with some family plans, it was already too late. The rally or the protest was completed. And really what I want to talk about is how violence is rarely ever the answer. We have been seeing so much violence here, and there's so much of it that is just politically driven. It's insane what is happening here. I cannot believe I am living in a time when people feel unsafe to be themselves, to go out in public. People feel unsafe to even speak what's on their mind for fear of being targeted by others. I have so many different tabs pulled up on my computer right now just with bullshit that happened over the weekend with these No King protests and even other more concerning situations. Over a 24-hour period, Minnesota had 2 state representatives targeted by an assassin. One of them and her husband were killed. Thankfully, the other has survived. And thankfully, they have apprehended the person who was involved. In Portland, there was a clash between protesters and police, and 4 police officers were injured in this conflict. And even in this protest, a man drives a vehicle into the protesters. In Southern California, there was another hit and run of someone who took their vehicle and intentionally drove into the protesters and severely injured one individual. In Salt Lake City, there was someone who brought an assault rifle in an effort to counter the No Kings protest, and a peacekeeper, which I'm not able to find a whole lot of information about that right now, tried to handle the situation and shot an innocent bystander who was just there for the protest. There was a young man arrested in Nashville, Tennessee, because he was going to counter-protest the protesters for the No Kings rally there, and pulled a handgun out and threatened the protesters with it. One of the things, this has been a very depressing dive for me to go into, to find references and articles and press releases about these different shootings and incidences. I wouldn't have known many of these things happened if it wasn't for the work of Andrew Seidel and Brad Onishi and Dan Miller, who put these on my radar thanks to the podcasts that they release. And this is not how it should be. Especially when we have people who are exercising their right to their freedom of speech and their freedom to protest. Violence is rarely ever the correct answer to any of these situations. Violence just begets more violence. And the thing that is probably the most concerning, especially since these are very fear-driven acts of violence against other people, if not fear-driven, then they are because of power. People trying to maintain power or gain power. The people who commit these violent acts oftentimes are individuals who are the most frightened, or I would even say, the worst situations, they have been the most indoctrinated by some kind of radical belief. The person involved in the assassination attempts in Minnesota, Vance Bolter, comes from a tradition and even went to a Christian institute to learn and grow as a missionary and as a minister, that taught him some very radical ideas. That there is a war going on. And I have even seen so many examples of these very far-right Christians who say that they are trying to bring the second coming of Jesus Christ, and no one knows when that's supposed to take place. And just from what I know in that tradition, it's not something that we bring. It's when God does return. And yet, even if you just take a look at the messages that were coming from a lot of people, during the elections this last year, hearing so many people talk about Jezebel spirits and people being influenced or even possessed by demons, and that these people need to be battled against, that there is a war, a spiritual war that is taking place. And this is one of the things that I just cannot stand for anymore. I really can't. There are many people who say that they believe and value life, who just do not seem to show action towards that. And they can be the most violent against people who believe something different or even think something different. And in everything that I've been hearing about this, it's typically not because they are being persecuted by any means, but they're afraid of losing the power and the control that they have. This nation has been run for so long by old white men who want to maintain dominance and control over everyone and everything else. So many people think that abortion is murder, and yet they're perfectly fine going and taking weapons and murdering people because they have a different idea on abortion. Violence is rarely the correct answer. And I'm trying to be very careful on how I say that and not say that violence is never the answer, because there is also self-defense. I'm not saying that you cannot defend yourself, but these actions None of them had anything to do with self-defense. Even the protesters in Portland who injured police officers, they were trying to break into a federal building. And that's not allowed. You're not allowed to do that. And while, yes, they probably were believing or even thinking that they were doing something to help because of all of the ICE raids and just so much bullshit that is going on around here, that violence is not the way to handle it. If someone is threatening your life and you defend yourself, I will have no qualms with those actions. But if you show up to a peaceful protest and you bring firearms and military or protective vests, and you bring, there was even someone else that was found to have had pipe bombs in his home. If you are coming to people that are using their right to demonstrate and their right to protest and their right to speak out against the injustices that they are seeing, and you want to silence them or threaten them or bully them, and you are the one who is coming with guns, that's not self-defense. You're not defending yourself. You're terrorizing at that point. Again, I really wish that for my 100th episode, I could have talked about anything other than this. And yet, I guess that's not a luxury I can afford right now. These times are so chaotic, and I never know what's going to happen from day to day. I know that even if I did go to the No Kings protest that was held here locally, Libby would be concerned for me. She would. She would have anxiety over it because we don't know how people are going to respond over here. I have wanted to get an ally flag and display it, hang it outside of our house. And yet we don't know what kind of recourse is going to happen because emotions and tempers are so high right now. This kind of stuff should not be happening. It really shouldn't be happening. I hold so much solidarity for those who have been harmed and those who have lost their lives because they were standing up for their rights and for what they believe in. And they just wanted to be heard. I do not have solidarity for any of those who chose violence. Look at any point in history where violence was used as a solution to a problem. How often did that not end in more violence? One of the great examples of this is taking a look at Viking legends. I listen to the Myths and Legends podcast, and I can't tell you how many stories I have heard where a group raids over here or they attack this kingdom over here, and then it turns into this hurricane, really, of trying to get vengeance and revenge that just begets more vengeance and revenge. When does it end? Really, when does it end? I don't even really know what else I want to say on this. I am so tired of hearing nothing but bad news about people just not respecting the lives of others. Again, going back to Vance Bolter, who assassinated a senator and her husband. He values life. You can tell he values life because he really does not want there to be any kind of abortion access, because he values the life of unborn fetuses and unborn children. And yet he takes the lives of 2 people and leaves their children without parents. How is that valuing life? Because they were possessed by demons? I have no doubts that is something that he probably believed, because they did not believe the same things that he does. These people who resort to violence, I have often seen as well, are the ones who accuse the other side of the same violence that they are afraid of, and the same violence that they initiate. For me, it goes without saying that I need to unplug a little bit. I have taken in so many news articles just within the last hour and a half, 2 hours, just to come up with some examples of what happened over this last Saturday. And it's depressing. It is very depressing. If you find yourself in a silo where all you are receiving is the same information over and over again, and it is triggering you to hate, or it's triggering you to fear, it's time to unplug. It really is. Unplug. Do something wholesome. Do something that is life-giving. Spend time with those you love. And don't allow yourself to go down this spiral of fear and hate. That never ends well. It never does. I don't even really know how to end this topic, how to end this conversation here. I guess the most important thing for me to say is take care of yourself and protect yourself and those that you love. But do not resort to violence. Do not resort to violence. Unless it happens to be a situation where you have to defend yourself. Violence is rarely ever the right solution. It just causes so much heartache, so much pain, and it just makes people more violent in the end. Take care of yourself, and until next time, live strong for today.